All right, Art 1-2, welcome to part 2 of shading the glass on your still life. So I still have my final draft on my newspaper padding. And that helps us like work the graphite into the drawing paper. It also helps us get smooth value, and it helps like with the blending process as well. So I am gonna put that yellow piece of paper underneath my hand so that I'm not smudging everything that I drew underneath. I'm going to have my image handy, but we're really going to focus on just the blending for this first part. Okay, so you want your medium and small blender. We're going to start with medium, and here, of course, we're going to use small around the highlights and in the mouth or rim and the handle. Okay, so I'm going to blend my darkest values first. And I want to keep the shape. So I kind of outline the shape. Circular motion. Remember, you're holding your blender still kind of horizontally. So you're using like more of the side of it than you are the tip. You want the tip to stay pretty pointy. Okay, and here's pretty tiny. I'm going to come back along the edge with my small blender, but I'll do the bigger stuff while I'm here. So I'm keeping that shape, and it's a light medium value, so I'm not pressing very hard. Okay, so in this area, it is light, but not white. So I'm going to go back over it with just my blender, kind of add a value. I'm reblending the shapes that are next to it. Okay, small blender. Getting the edges really nice and neat. So I'm kind of outlining with the small blender. And I'm double checking, like, what value is that? Okay, it's fairly light in this whole area. So I don't want to press very hard, but I still want it to be like smooth. So take your time in blending, because if you get a really good first layer, you don't have to go back over it. You don't have to refine. I mean, we're definitely going to refine some of the dark values, but you don't want to have to go back and blend everything. Just do it right the first time. Take your time and do it well. Okay, so I'm lightening up my pressure along the side. So then in this area, it's slightly lighter than what it's next to. So I'm going to fade out my fuzzy shapes a little bit with somewhat light pressure. Okay, so on that cloth, it's still just white. I give it a light value. Okay. I'm still going to avoid the highlights. And I feel like I blended over a piece of my wood. Okay, fix that. Okay. All right, so in this little piece between the two pieces of wood, the cloth and the glass, I'm gonna go and do the lighter, or next to the lighter part, and then I'm gonna blend over that light part with just a little bit of pressure. Okay, so then behind that cloth, it's darker all along the edge, so I'm trying to get a clean edge. I'm gonna fade up. So I do want you to move your paper so it's comfortable, like for you, especially trying to get all in and around and get clean edges as we go. So especially when we get in here, I'm definitely gonna be moving my paper around. Okay, so this area was lighter but not white. Fading pretty close to my highlights. Okay, so let's just get some of the bigger stuff blended with medium blender before we switch. So I'm going around my highlights, like avoiding them, not actually going around them. Okay, I'm gonna avoid the top because I'm gonna use the tiny blender for that, or small. Okay, and actually, I really think in the handle, I'm just gonna use a small. So let's switch blenders. We're gonna come back and actually like blend all around those highlights very carefully. So I'm gonna outline with my blender and then fade out into what I have. So I wanna try to get rid of those dark halos. Even though it is fairly dark, we'll still blend into what we have. So I'm just trying to make sure I'm not blending over anything that is there. Okay, now I'm going to turn my paper so that I can get the edges pretty good. Having my image right next to me so I can kind of compare and make sure I'm not blending over anything that I want to keep. So I'm really trying to get it good so I don't have to come back. Like I want to try to fade it out into what's already there. If it looks like a dark halo, then we'll have to like add another layer to kind of match it. So I'm really trying to, you know, do a pretty good job the first time. And if you accidentally blend over, I mean, obviously we can erase. So it's not that big of a deal. Okay, so all those highlights, I blended all around and in between. And I know I'm gonna have to go back and erase a little bit. That's okay. All right, definitely getting around in between on that neck. that neck doesn't look very smooth. So I'm going to go back and try to use more of the side of it and do like a once over circular motion. Okay, I think that looks a little bit better. Okay, let's do the handle. We'll come back to the top. I kind of like to get all the easy stuff first and then work to the more difficult parts. Okay, so I want to maintain these little dark lines. So I'm going to blend over those. So I am going to outline with my blender the lighter edge, so I don't have to go back and do that edge until we do the background. Okay, blending around my highlights on the handle. I'm going to make those a little thinner because I made them a little bit thicker so that I could go around them. Now just using what's left over around the highlights, whatever's on your blender, you're gonna just add a tone to the rest of that handle. Okay. All right, super carefully. We're gonna go around these little highlights on the mouth, kind of touch where the really dark parts are. Go around. Highlights. And we're definitely gonna clean that up for sure. Okay, so it's all blended. Usually what I do, let me back up a little bit. Okay, there we go. Is squint my eyes and make them fuzzy and kind of double check, like, is where it's dark in the image dark on my drawing? Or if you hold it up from arm's length away and you look from a little bit further away, because you're blending so close, you're adding value so close. So in general, like when I squint my eyes and make them fuzzy, I feel like this area, like right here, needs to be darker, but not a lot. So I'm gonna go back with 2B. And I'm gonna add a little bit more to that area. I've lost some detail, I'm gonna put back in. And then with mechanical pencil, I'm gonna get in between that petal and the wood. Like it's a little flatter on the wood, it looks like. I could still bring the wood in a little bit more. With mechanical. You don't have to do those little frayed edges of the fake flower, it's okay. Okay, so I went much darker in there. I do feel like I could probably use mechanical pencil and clean up the edge of the cloth there. At the very bottom, I add another layer. Get right up next to the edge of the petal. Okay. Then I do think in here, I do need to add another layer. Above the cloth. Kind of outlining and match that outline and fade out into what you have. And then I'm just going to do a light layer over that shape. Okay, so a little bit behind the piece of wood. And we'll clean that up like when we do the piece of wood too. So it's going to get refined again. I feel like in general, like underneath the highlights, it's not as light as what I had it. But I am going to add another layer where the dark parts were as well. I think that in general, this part kind of fades out a little bit more. Okay. With 6B, I'm going to go over my dark parts. So actually I feel like that's fine. This part, I feel like it gets a little bit wider up top. A little bit more. A little bit more. I'm going to put in the squiggliness of that line. Okay, so then with mechanical pencil, I'm going to go back into that handle. Actually, do a little 2B. I feel like it's darker on the side of the bottle. And we'll fade that in. And then it just kind of fades into what's there. But at the top side, it's a little darker. Okay, and the handle. I'm looking how there is a darker edge like here, but not super dark. So I'm just going to kind of refine, fade that in with mechanical. Get this slightly curves. And you have that piece to erase out that part up. Add another layer on this left side of the bottle. And then I'm just looking for a little bit of variety. Like here, this looks pretty plain to me. So here there's a slight darker area, slight darker area. Already did that other side. And the handle, a little bit darker here. Although I'm going to use mechanical to get right below the highlight. And I want that edge. Okay, this mouth area. So the background, I mean, we're gonna add to it, but I'm gonna outline and then fade it in. And if the top looks a little outliney, it's okay. Like, it's gonna be hard to get clean edges and blending a tiny area like that. So I'm gonna put the shadow underneath the rim part, the darker area above, below. It looks like a little streak going behind. Just don't want to mess up your highlights. Okay, so now we're gonna super carefully go back and blend. So if it's a bigger area, use your medium. So in here, I'm gonna use my medium blender, kind of fade out what I added, but then I'm gonna go back with the small to get the edges because I don't want to lose all that detail. Okay, then very gently, because this was the part that was a little bit too light, I'm going to go back over, not a lot of pressure. And just do a layer to darken. Okay, small blender. Go back over where I put my darks and along the edges of stuff that I added value to. Blend this. This looks like a little more curved over here. Just what's on my medium blender. Okay, and then in between, super carefully with your tiny tip of the blender, kind of fade that out, fade the bottom, and go behind the flower and kind of fade out. Okay, all right, that little dark streak along the upper right hand side, the darker edge that we added, and just kind of fade it in a little so it doesn't look like an outline, just a darker edge. Okay, super carefully in the handle, I'm gonna go back, just kind of touch over the lines so that they don't look drawn on there. It just looks like part of the value. But I'm trying to keep the lines there. So I don't want to totally blend over it, but I do want that line to stay on the edge. Okay, so I'm just gonna touch over my dark values on the mouth or the rim of the jug. And erase out my highlight where I got that there. Okay. Now, with pencil top eraser, so I wouldn't use a brand new one. If you have an older one, use it. Or with this, we're going to go back and erase out some subtle kind of streakiness. And then we're going to go back with mechanical pencil and erase out the highlights one last time to really brighten them up. So whenever I'm refining and erasing, I always do it off padding. So I'm going to move, like, put your newspaper aside. We don't want your newspaper. Then I'm going to see if there's any areas I need to clean up. So I feel like a little bit, actually I'm going to match the value of this edge. So I am going to outline, but I'm going to try to not have it be dark. I'm going to have it be the same value. Just clean up that edge. The same thing with the handle. Like I'm barely pressing just so I can get a clean edge. And if you need to blend again, blend again. Okay. Let me look in here. That got a little fuzzy. So I'm going to use mechanical. Sorry. When I zoom in, it's like the height of my head. And so then I have to always, like, hitting my head all the time on this thing. Okay, so now we're going to take a look. And like here, looks like a little bit of like reflection. It looks like it's from the flower itself. There's a little bit of reflection here happening. All these slight, tiny, like areas that aren't light, and they're not white. They're just like slightly lighter. So all the reflections we're going to go back and add. So this is really what makes it look like glass. So over here, I'll kind of brighten up that side. Over here, I kind of have it in there already. And then it's kind of curved and it goes right on top. It's on the outside of the glass. And we're going to soften that with, and then there's two little reflections I didn't see before. So we'll try to erase those out. And then with the small blender, kind of go around a little bit. Okay. Let's see where else. So you're kind of drawing the shininess with your eraser. Okay, a little bit on this side. tiny bit. And it's usually in a curved part of the item. Okay, so along here at the top on the left. Ooh, that's a little bit bright. So I'm erasing out a little bit lighter than I think I need, so I'm going to go back and blend over it slightly. Not even really going to touch the top of that. It's like a slight reflection on that part. Okay, so using the opposite end, so this is the end that's dirty. I'm gonna use the opposite end of the blender because I just want to kind of soften some of my eraser stuff. Like I feel like over here I got a little bit too light, so I'm just gonna blend over it to make it fuzzy looking again, so it's more subtle. Blend over that a little. Over here it got a little bit light. Over here I feel like I got a little bit too light. Maybe right there. Okay, our last step is to erase out the shiny white part. So if you have any tiny areas, I'm gonna scoot this a little bit closer to me. With the mechanical pencil, turn your arm, or turn your paper so your arm is comfortable. And super carefully, you're gonna lift out. And actually my eraser is dirty. So on this yellow sheet of paper, I'm just gonna erase. Trying to keep it flat because I want to keep it sharp. Okay, so I cleaned up my eraser a little bit. And then if you see any other little highlights that you want to add in, like over here, little tiny highlights, so the little tiny streaks, we're going to add back in with the edge of the eraser. So you don't want to use this eraser for anything else. We're going to need it for self-portrait stuff, like little erasing out highlights in hair and eyes. It's like the smallest eraser you have. So I selectively use this eraser, really just for shiny stuff. Okay, that looks done to me. Hopefully yours looks good and you're impressed with your skill level. And if it's not perfect, that's fine. But if it's a bunch of fuzzy mess, then you need to go back and do that second layer and refine and clean up. And you can always kind of outline, but you know, like match the value that it is. So if I needed to clean up that edge, I would like really gently kind of go over it to create a clean edge. That way you don't have to touch it again and you're done.